Welcome back to the Fly Culture Podcast. I'm Pete Tigers. I hope you're catching a few fish. I've been staying off my local river and have been chasing carp. I think it's habit forming. Thanks, Jeff, for the flies. They work really, really well. Tiny bit of housekeeping. We now have a digital version of Fly Culture that is available to buy from our website. I know we have listeners from around the fly fishing world, so if you'd like a copy, head over to the website flyculturemag.com. You can see what we're all about. Okay, so on to my guest. Richard Gorodecky is a fly angler based in Ireland. The story of how he got there is an interesting one in itself, but he has recently published a fabulous book, Throwing Feathers in the Wind, that he tells me about and also reads a section from. We cover a lot of ground that I hope you're going to enjoy. Richard, it's great to have you along on the podcast. How are you doing?
Very, very good, Pete. Thanks so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this. We've been chatting about it for a while, so it's lovely to chat with you. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I'm doing very well, by the way. Yeah,
good. Well, I'm pleased to hear that. And for listeners, can you give us an idea of where you're speaking to us from?
Yeah, so I am in the Knockmealdown Mountains, which is in West Waterford in Ireland. And in river terms, that would be about 20 minutes drive from the Blackwater, the River Nire, the Shore, and some other rivers that will remain nameless. So it's right. Really, I would say the very best river fishing in Ireland is here, which is kind of why I am.
It sounds as though it's not a lucky coincidence you're living where you're living then.
It certainly isn't. No, it's all through design and madness and the passion of fly fishing. It actually came down to those rivers I just named. I actually drew a circle. Just had this sort of mad idea that could we live in Ireland, and could I make fishing an even bigger part of my life than it already was? And I drew this red circle that touched all of those rivers. And I just said to my wife, Julia, just anywhere in that circle would be heaven, anywhere in that circle. And it's a reasonably, it's sort of West Waterford, Tipperary. And So actually I'll read a little something later, which will get a bit more context to kind of how I ended up there. So I won't give too much away at this point, but it's a beautiful, beautiful place to live and fish.
I know the Shore a little bit, and I remember being on the river at about 11:30 at night in pretty much darkness with quite a magnificent caddis hatch going on and just lifting into any slurp that we could hear just in case. And it is a special river. It's quite a big river, isn't it? In some respects as well. Certainly where I fished it, I was surprised how big it actually was.
Yeah. I mean, the caddis, the sedge is spectacular on the shore. We all get very excited about the mayfly and going to fish on Corrib or fishing some of the chalk streams during mayfly time. But I would say that the caddis hatch on the shore is every bit. In fact, I would say it's a lot more reliable than the mayfly. A big river. I suppose it really depends at what point you're on the river, because obviously, quite high up, there's less of it, and increasingly so as you work down. But it's not it's a 9-foot weight river, so it's not it's not a vast. The Blackwater is a much bigger, much stronger river. And then you've got all of it's a very big catchment, and you have all these incredible tributaries to the shore that see very little angling attention, and they can be, tiny little things with often tiny little fish. But I really actually love that. I don't, I'm not obsessed with big fish. I don't have an issue with catching big fish. Let's be clear about that. But I also love little waters and little fish, and matching the gear really to that. I think if you've got the right size rod, a half a pound trout is a spectacular fish. Do you remember where you were fishing on the shore? Whereabouts?
I'm trying. We were staying, and this is a long time ago. We were staying with Andrew Ryan at the time, so Clonmel Way, and we fished some of those tributaries, which were extraordinary, like you say, were fantastic. So I can't remember if it was a day ticket water. It struck me how high the banks were. I guess that's why I was saying in that sort of context about the size of the river, and it just struck me as, I suppose because I was fishing small little streams in Devon, that it probably felt bigger than what I was possibly fishing from that point of view. So
for sure. So Andrew's just down the road. Andrew's probably 20 minutes drive. Clonanav is his fly fishing shop, and his waters are all around there. And actually, it was fishing with Andrew that first introduced me to this area. So we could blame him.
Sounds very, very fair. Yeah. So where you are now, you're speaking already passionately about where you are. Where were you previously, and how would you compare the fishing to where you were before? Yeah.
So, obviously, from my accent, I'm not Irish. I was grew up in London. I grew up in northwest London in Wembley, fishing the Grand Union Canal, and actually it was the canal that kind of started my journey into fishing. And it was fabulous. It was discovering sparrowhawks and sort of wildlife that you certainly wouldn't see usually could be found on this canal. And I suppose that was my gateway drug into fishing and a love of the outdoors. So actually, when I was 23, 24, I moved to Amsterdam, which wasn't the greatest move for a trout fisherman because, there's not really, there are stocked lakes and things like that. But, in terms of wild trout fishing, there isn't really any little bit of sea trout fishing. But the Dutch are incredible fly fishermen and women, very, very adaptive. They can catch just about anything on a fly. So I was in Amsterdam for 20 years, perhaps, maybe not quite as long as that. And I did a lot of carp fishing on the fly, which I still think is one of the, an absolutely brilliant way to fish. They're amazing fish, and they're amazing on the fly. Not easy. Very, very challenging, very exciting. Put a lot of, if you want to see how much backing you've got on your reel, a carp will let you know. But obviously I couldn't fly fish a trout there. So I did a lot of traveling while I was living there. Luckily, I had a job that also involved a lot of traveling. And so I'd always carry a little sort of 4-piece or even a 6-piece rod and try and grab trout fishing or more classical fly fishing wherever I was. And and then it was a few years ago. I think I first came to Ireland when I was 20, and then really, I think that really got me into fly fishing beyond everything else. Everything else sort of just went slightly out of focus, and that's when that obsession took hold and never left. And so it's impossible to compare Ireland to Holland. The fishing's completely different species, different needs, different tackle, different everything. But it was still good. It was really, I learned a hell of a lot from Dutch anglers, and I learned a hell of a lot from fishing for things that you really probably doesn't make any sense to fly fish for. Incomparable, I think. Yeah.
It fascinates me that you talk about the Dutch, and I think I was just thinking about it, 3 guests on Jay Lee, Hans van Klinken, and Jeroen Schundergang. Yet, like we say, the opportunities for fishing in the way that we would visualize them are not there. Yet it strikes me, as you have alluded to, that the Dutch are hugely passionate anglers despite
Hugely.
the fishing. And I'd love to know why you think that might be, given that. And I know Jay travels down to Germany and he goes to Montana and places like that. Do you think there's an element of that people have to explore a little bit further, hold on to those moments of fishing they've got, and that nurtures and keeps them going until they go again? Or they might be fishing for the carp, like you say, the canals, all of those sorts of things. And I'm just trying to understand why that is such a vibrant, and I would say perhaps I'm unfair putting where you are now into it, but I've been having this conversation a lot recently about the age of fly anglers, and we always know that it's a little bit older. Were they there a little bit younger as well?
So I mean, break that apart a little bit. So I don't think Dutch fly anglers see themselves as, losing out or just kind of putting up or making best of a bad situation. I mean, I think they really there's so much water there. There's so much water to explore. So in many ways, it's an angler's paradise. For fly fishing, classic fly fishing, it's not really there. But then you've got tremendous pike on the fly. You've got carp on the fly. So I don't think that they're just whiling away their time before they can go somewhere proper to fish. I think they're just embracing what they have. The Dutch are an incredibly practical bunch. I think a lot of people sort of view the Dutch as being sort of super laid back and everything's, that will be fine. They're actually really pragmatic. And I think that's probably expressed in their fishing. It's like, if we've got pike and if we've got carp and if we've got roach and if we've got perch, then that's what we're going to fish for. And we're going to do it brilliantly. We're going to have a great time. People like Hans van Klinken and the Klinkhammer. I mean, this is a fly developed for grayling. And as far as I know, there are absolutely no grayling in Holland. So they're obviously, traveling anglers, and particularly the ones that we would have heard of. But yeah, I don't know what it is if there's something particular about the Dutch character that makes them. Yeah, they're very pragmatic. The anglers I fished with were very thoughtful, clever anglers. They would really work stuff out, and constantly adapt to the situation that arose, which I think we can all learn from, because there have been times when I've got the wrong fly on, fishing in the wrong places, and it becomes slightly mechanized, and you just got to stop and say, well, what am I doing? What am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? What's the water telling me? What are the conditions telling me? And I think they're just really good with that. They actually call the roach the Dutch trout. The roach would be, I suppose, as close as they get to trout fishing. Is the fight similar? I don't know, but it's a beautiful fish.
Yeah, I was thinking also, because I think they're super cool, and what they're doing there really interests me. And I think I've had Nico, from Yamami as well, who's over there as well. Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. So that speaks volumes about them. And what about the age group then, before we shift on? They're comparable to, let's say, UK.
Yeah, I mean, fishing generally. We lived on a canal in Amsterdam, and we were living in an area which was the old Amsterdam docks, like the Docklands, but they silted up very, very early on. So, but anyway, so there was a lot of water where we were, and we were just off the river, the IJsselmeer, and the River Eye. So there was a lot of, bigger fish that were coming to, and there was a lot of kids fishing where we were, mainly fishing soft baits and spinners and things like that. But it was really, really good to see a lot of young people out fishing, and they were quite cool kids. They weren't, it was a bit of a scene. So the older anglers, the fly anglers, I didn't go to places that were sort of necessarily frequented by other anglers, so I wouldn't. But generally, I suppose, yeah, we're getting old, aren't we? We're getting quite long in the tooth. A lot of us fly anglers. But saying that, I think there is a shift and a perception. Yeah, I don't know if I can mention it, but there was a magazine in the States called This Is Fly, which sort of felt like surf culture from the early 80s and skateboard culture and things like that. And there are filmmakers mainly in the States making very cool fly fishing films and very sort of youthful, and it all kind of fits in this general outdoor there's I call them the Patagonia sports, but it's fly fishing, climbing, trail running, surfing. There's a sort of connection and camaraderie between those pastimes, I think, and there is a younger audience that it's appealing to. So I think there is a new generation. They just need to be supported and welcomed, and the sport will be all right.
Like that a lot. Right, let's move back to you. Let's move back to Ireland, and I would like to understand a little bit more about you as an angler. So how do you like to fish? Are you somebody who likes to target rising fish? Do you like to search the water? Do you like to fish nymphs? Do you like wets? Or is it all good, or you fish what's appropriate?
I would like to say that I would fish what's appropriate, but that wouldn't be true. I'm a dry or die kind of fly fisherman. It's not that I'm a purist. It's not that I see it above any other way of fly fishing. It's just what I love. I love to cast to a rising fish or to a seen fish. I love takes on the surface. I love dry flies. I love, trying to get them to just, glide in such a way that the fish can't resist them. So I would tend 90% of my fishing would be with a dry fly, and the other 10% I might have a dropper hanging underneath the dry. So I'm very much a trout fisherman, and I'm very much a dry fly trout fisherman. But I'm lucky to be fishing the kind of waters where that's actually a really good way to fish, and it's a really good way to catch. So it's not like I'm just throwing dry flies over water that's only going to respond to nymph. So very much. And I tend to fish very long leaders, very light, very small flies for the most part. I think a lot of fish are put off by the sort of weight of tackle and obviously the sort of presentation that goes with that kind of tackle weight. But I really believe in sort of stripping back and just keeping things as simple and as light and as convincing as possible.
And so do you commit because of where you are now, does that mean that you'll commit a day, or because being so close to some amazing rivers, do you like to just snatch a few hours here and there, or when there's a hatch on, or where the best timing is? How do you adjust your fly fishing to where you're living now?
It's changed dramatically, actually, Pete. I mean, if I go on holiday fishing somewhere, I will fish from sun up to way beyond sundown. I will fish from sun up to moon up. And I'll fish all day and I'll fish hard. Here, I am kind of, the longer I'm here, the longer I know the more I know about the behavior of the river, the behavior of the fish. At the moment, as you mentioned earlier, the sort of the evening sedge fishing. At the moment, my fishing would be between 8:30 and maybe 11:30 at night. And I would try and get down the river 4 or 5 times a week. I have a very understanding wife, which, kind of puts up with that sort of thing. Luckily, the sedge aren't a year-round thing. Otherwise, I might have some issues. But and earlier in the year, very early in the season, usually the rivers would be too high to fish here. They'd usually be flooded out, but we had very low water and it was very warm. I'm sure you had the same over there. And between sort of 11 a.m. and 2 p.m., there was consistent hatches of little midges, tiny, tiny little flies. And there was amazing, amazing dry fly fishing in a time when usually I wouldn't have even have blown the dust off the rods. So I can really adapt to what the river's doing. I'll often, if I go anywhere in any direction by car, I'll drive past a river. So I'm always seeing the river height. What's the color of the river? Am I seeing any movement? So I'm so close to the fishing, I can fish probably, I suppose, more accurate windows. Yeah.
I guess that's what I was trying to find out a little bit about, because being so close, you get into the rhythm and the mood and the feel of the river so much more quickly, don't you? That as you're saying, 5 times a week down there, 4 or 5 times a week, that you just feel it, don't you? And you know what's going on, and you know when things are going to happen. And like you say, those midge hatches, when they're, and you really get you're really dialed into your home water, aren't you?
You are. You get to know it very well in every kind of aspect. So and every year I learn. Every year I'm also reminded of how little I know. So I wouldn't say I've sussed these rivers, but every year I get a bit smarter. But yeah, the water height, the wind direction. There's so many, and I suppose you do tune to this, and I suppose living remotely, we live in the mountains here. I think generally your life becomes more in tune to more natural cycles, which is a wonderful, wonderful way to live. It goes on beyond fishing. We're sort of growing our own vegetables here and stuff like that, and what you can grow and what's in season, what's out of season. So everything takes on this sort of calendar, this sort of annual shifting of things. And the more you can tune into it, I think the more satisfying it is to be a part of the natural cycle, I suppose. Yeah.
And Richard, tell me, why do you fly fish?
That is such a big question. It's a very small question, but the answer is so big. Fishing has been such a consistent friend to me over the years. It's always been the place I've gone to escape, to seek sanctuary, to feel fulfilled, to be engaged, to reconnect. It's kind of it's always given me what I've needed, and continues to give me what I needed. I know that sounds a little bit woo-woo, and I don't really mean it to be like that, but I suppose it is a connection. I love the outdoors. I love being in nature. And I think when you fish, you become part of that rather than just an observer. You become part of that system, or part of that landscape, or part of that river, or whatever else it is you're doing that gets you out there. So your experience is much deeper. But yeah, I've friendships based on fly fishing. I have films based on fly fishing, books based, everything. I think you've got to, it's not a bad idea to give yourself up to something that you truly love. And for me, fishing is what I truly love. And it just seems to deliver on so many aspects of my life. I don't know if I answered that question well or not, but it's a tough one.
I think you did, and I think people listening will know exactly what you mean as well. So I think you answered it perfectly. On this, I'm going to use the J word, the journey of fishing for you. Have you had a mentor, somebody who's had a big impact on you as a fly fisherman and perhaps beyond that too?
So my uncle Bill was the first person to take me fishing, and that was sort of I can sort of see at that point the road forked, and I became a fisherman, and kind of everything changed, in that direction. So, and my uncle Bill, he did take me fly fishing. He wasn't really a fly fisherman. He was just a fisherman. It was just whether you were going to the sea or you were going to a lake, or he was he lived in Saltburn in Yorkshire, and there was Saltburn. I think it's Saltburn Beck. It's a little trout stream, so we could go trout fishing there, and you could go to the sea. And he was just this kind of all-rounder, just incredible example of being a bloke, in all the best ways, great tool shed and brewed his own beer and all of that stuff. And so Uncle Bill was sort of became this, I suppose, template for, how you should, as a kid, as this little kid, it's like, right, I should grow up in that direction if I can. So I think he was, but I wouldn't say he was a fly fishing mentor. A fly fishing mentor, not really. I spent an awful lot of time getting it wrong. I remember once, this is when I was living in London, and the only place really close to London that I knew of when I was just starting out fly fishing, just becoming curious, was Syon Park. There was this sort of lake there, a put and take lake. And I remember the gilly there, not the gilly, the person who collected the ticket money. He came up to me and he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm learning to fly cast." And he said, out of a book, I had this book of fly fishing on the grass down next to me. I'm reading the pages and then trying to now you can imagine how bad a caster I was for so long, but I'm self-taught. I've fished with some great anglers. I've fished with some great guides over the years, but I suppose the thing that's taught me most about fly fishing is fly fishing. Just doing it and getting a feel for it, and probably doing it wrong for a great number of years. I've fished with a few incredible anglers, and you always learn. If you're in the company of a great angler, you learn a hell of a lot just watching them. I remember I fished with Paul Proctor in Slovenia, and he was just fishing at a completely different level than anything I'd seen before. And I think just being in his company makes you a better, or people like that being in their company make you a better angler. And some of them more, I've been lucky enough to travel to some quite amazing fishing locations around the world. And a lot of the time you'll fish with a guide, and, some of those guides and just the way they look, that's great company to be in. But I haven't really had an individual who kind of took my hand and took me on this fly fishing journey. But there's just been lots of people at different times, and also just a lot of mistakes, a lot of learning, a lot of, the fish will let you know if you're doing it right or wrong. And then I suppose you just have to have the wisdom to adapt, based on that response.
You said some lovely things there and some really interesting things as well. And I was kind of thinking what you said about, you getting it wrong and the fish telling you if you're getting it right as well. And it actually doesn't matter that much, does it? And what I mean by that is, if you stuff a cast, it doesn't matter. It's not a life or death situation. It may cost you a fish somewhere down the line. But as long as you're getting something from that and you're understanding, perhaps, I think, what went wrong. Because if you're understanding that, then you can put it right. So I think that helps a little bit. But I spent so much time worrying about it, and it doesn't really matter. We do it because it's fun, don't we? And it doesn't, like I'm saying, if you get caught in a tree, if this happens, that happens, it really doesn't. But if you're taking something from it, more importantly, the enjoyment aspect of it, which is the really important part of it. But if you're walking away saying, do you know, I really fished well today, or I didn't get stuck in a tree, but when you did, you take something from that. That's, I think, how you improve as well, isn't it?
I think so. I mean, I think you're tapping into something much bigger there as well. It's like, if you're, why do you fish? What value are you getting from a day's fishing or an afternoon's fishing or a few hours fishing? And there's so much reward there without the sort of, technically, was that a good cast? Was that a big, how many flies did I leave in the trees? All of these things, when that, maybe you need to be fishing for a while to realize that. Because at first I think there's the various stages to becoming a fly fisherman, and you get these different sort of obsessions, like distance. How far can I cast? I need or then the pursuit of the ultimate 9-foot 5-weight fly rod, so you can, always cast down to the backing. This obsession with distance, or always having the newest, shiniest tackle, and all of these things. You've got to kind of work through them. And there's so many of these. There's so many things that fishing isn't about, but you've almost got to just push through all of those to then, get to some sort of stage with fishing when you kind of realize, actually, all of this is good and all of this is wonderful. And yeah, some days work and some days don't work so well. But what is it they say? A bad day's fishing is always better than a good day's work. Yeah, so there's much to be enjoyed, and if you choose to, I spend quite a lot of time fishing some really overgrown, what most people would classify as fairly unfishable waters. You're setting yourself up for failure. I mean, absolutely. I'm trying to cast a fly in places where you can't cast a fly, or really shouldn't even attempt to cast a fly. And I'm getting kicks out of that. So I don't know what that says about me or what it says about fishing, but So, recently I bought this 6-foot 2-weight glass rod, particularly for places that I just could not get a larger fly rod into. And, and it's frustrating as hell, and it's wonderful. So, yeah, I suppose it's just working out. Yeah, just after you kind of work out what's important and what isn't important. But time, I think you have to fish through all of these things to get to this. I think you're at a fairly enlightened state, Pete.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I've, when you were saying some of those things, I was going tick in my mind, tick. Yes, I've done all of those sorts of things. But for me, that attraction is there because there's so many good things that we can discover. And I'm still discovering about fly fishing. And we were talking off mic about carp, and I'm learning a little bit more about that now. I've got something else I can obsess over for a little bit. And that's what keeps me fresh and interested in it. And I think this is why it's so good. I think this is why we love fly fishing so much, that there are so many different aspects of it that, like you say, we can obsess over and then move on perhaps to the next best thing or the next new thing. Whereas, put me on a river and I'm in a Zen thing there. I don't even have to cast actually sometimes. I'm perfectly happy being where I am. I see a rising fish, and sometimes I might make one cast in a day, and that's it. And I'm perfectly happy. And that's that Zen thing, isn't it? That you get to a level via many different channels and routes. And then actually there's a little tiny fork in the road that takes you somewhere new as well, isn't there?
Mm. And I think the what I've been consciously doing, I suppose, over the last few years, is stopping, remembering to stop fishing, to take a moment to sit on the, if there's somewhere to sit for a moment. If there's somewhere to stand for a moment, and just let yourself be, because you can get quite tunnel vision, particularly with dry fly fishing. You're so hypnotized by the fly and into quite a small area that you can lose the bigger sense of where you are. So I try to put stops into my fishing, and just and those stops, sometimes those stops will just be waiting to see a fish, which is a smart kind of stop, or waiting for a hatch to develop more, for the fish to gain more confidence so you're more likely to have success. And sometimes it's just like, just stop and look around, and building in these stops makes fishing and the whole experience much better. But I think I had to kind of remind myself, because you can get too far into it, can't you? You can just get too far into the next fish, which is a terrible shame.
Yeah, they're all good. They're all good. Now, I want to move on a little bit because, and I want listeners to, I think we've got a wonderful sense of you as an angler. And for listeners, that I asked Richard along to the podcast because he's written a wonderful book called Throwing Feathers in the Wind. And I'd call it a contemporary piece of writing as well, up there with, Ben, Boo, Chad. I've just really enjoyed reading it so far, and I've not completely finished yet, but I stopped at a beautiful part in the book that we may touch and we may not. But I know at the introduction at the start, you struggle to say what the book is about for listeners. So without trying to put you too much on the spot, can you give them an idea of what it's about?
Yeah. Well, I think actually one of the hardest things to write in this book was the introduction to the book, which is where I kind of positioned the book. I found the actual writing of the chapters far easier. So, I'm going to read a little bit from the intro, because I hope I kind of got to a point of where it should be. So, many wise people, particularly those who have failed to catch a fish for a while, turn to the great adage, "There's more to fishing than catching fish." And it is this more that is what the book is really about. There's so much more. This book is about nature, adventure, escape, respite, friendship, solitude, belonging, not belonging, wonder, and moments of monumental stupidity and absurdity. It's how, for lack of a better compass, fishing has been the North Star by which I've navigated my life and made the most sense of the world. And it is how the flow of water and its inhabitants over time can shape a life and soften its sharper edges. But I don't want to give the impression that this book tries to extract a deep philosophy from fishing. Even if it is that deep, I am not. But it is incredible how something as seemingly pointless as fishing has been so seemingly life-defining. So I suppose, that took so bloody long to write, but I think that sums it up really, because it's kind of, when you asked me earlier what fishing means to me, it's kind of everything. So if I write a book about fishing, I've written about everything, which makes it really, really hard to place in a bookshop. So, it's anyway. Yeah. So I think that kind of sums it up.
I think it does perfectly, and it's beautifully crafted, is amusing, stunningly observed as well. And you said that the introduction was difficult, but was some of the chapters, or had you sat on those chapters for a little while, either in your mind or on a PC somewhere, or did it flow? Do you sometimes go to the river and something happens that you've observed and then it suddenly comes out of you very, very easily?
So I kind of take notes of places where I am, fishing adventures I have. I take notes. I'm always looking. I tend to attract a certain amount of absurdity. I'm just one of those people where kind of crazy, stupid things happen around me, which is just fine. And so so a lot of this stuff is, I mean, really, this book is covering a lifetime of fishing. Actually, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that isn't in there, but it is, it goes from childhood to, just a few weeks ago or a few months ago. So a lot of this is based on notes I've taken. And so it is, I think the term is creative nonfiction. So all of these things happened, but not necessarily in that order and not necessarily on the same day. But, and some were, well, the thing is with writing is when you're tapping away, there were times when I was just writing and I was just laughing while writing. And I thought, then you've really tapped into something. And other times you're just chipping away at this lump of granite and you just don't seem to be getting any form and shape. And you just have to go with whatever it's, what I did learn through this is if you keep going through all of the, worries or fears or this isn't working, eventually it will reveal itself to you if you put the time in. And I think, some things were easy to write. Some things were incredibly hard to write. Some chapters were both of those things in different, but so I'm always keeping notes. I'm jotting down notes in my phone or on pieces of paper, and then I sort of try and dump all of those notes into a Word document. It's like I know there's a chapter in there, right? So I put that to one side, and then So I'm going through the process now of collecting new chapters and also remembering some things that probably should have gone in this first book. But anyway, we'll get that in a second.
And when did you get to the stage where you thought, actually, I want to make this into a book? Had it always been bubbling around in the background, or was it something you sat down and said, right, or you're on the river and you say, actually, I want to write a book? How did that come about?
Pretty strange how it came about. I was developing a feature film over a period of about 4 years with Screen Island and some great producers. And, I was, I don't know if you, but I do lots of different things. But one of the things I've done was some sort of short film. And anyway, I had this opportunity to make a feature film and I kind of put everything into it. I mean, all of my energy, all of my kind of creative energy into this project. And after about 4 years, the wheels fell off entirely. And then I was left with, I've just put 4 years into this creative output and it's just gone. And I have all of this creative energy. I have all of this drive. What am I going to do with it? And I wanted to do something with it that wouldn't really involve other people, where I couldn't be situation and circumstance were not that much, that I could just sit down with a computer and get on with it. And I've been talking about writing a book about fishing for far too long. And it's like, now's the time. I've got that energy. This thing's fallen away. I really want to put something out into the world that I really feel passionate about. And it was just the stars aligned. It's like, I'm going to go for it. But I've probably been talking about it for 20 years, but talking and doing and the distance between those points can be great.
As a creative, a question I often ask people is, during that creative process, do you find that you're most dynamic on a upswing of how you're feeling, or more so on a slight downswing? Do you detect anything there, or I'm always interested to know.
Mm. Huh. I had I'm going to tell a little side story. I had a friend. He was a really, really good poet, an exceptionally good poet, and then he fell in love and got married, and his poetry stopped entirely because he was content. So I think it's the creative process does require friction. You need kind of something to rub up against situation, circumstance. So probably, but I think fishing comes from such a happy place generally. And if things aren't going well, it's somewhere where I would seek sanctuary anyway. So I think when I write about fishing, just the act of writing about fishing makes me sort of feel good. So I would say that the actual writing took place in always a good state of mind, or always put me in a good state of mind, but perhaps the desire to write wasn't always from the happiest of places,
Yeah, yeah. That's. I would think probably a large percentage of people I've asked that question to have come back with a similar sort of answer, and that's why I like to understand it. And I think for myself, for my little things that I do, that I feel on a slight downer, that I can express myself more easily, if that makes
Mm,
sense.
it does.
Mm.
It does. And I suppose the need to express yourself during those times is greater.
Mm. Yeah.
Um, and usually the way out of it.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
wrote a piece recently for another magazine, and it just flowed. And I happened to be on it doesn't need to be. It's just a little downswing, and it flowed really, really easily. And I wrote it relatively quickly, and it was absolutely, I was happy with it and happy
Hmm.
to send it in. But I always like to understand that as well. So thank you for answering that. And the book, I know, hasn't been out that long, but what
No, not
was
very
it?
long. Just a couple of weeks,
Yeah.
really. Now,
What did it
yeah.
feel like when it was out there and you got that first copy and you saw it? Was that a special moment, or was that the ending of that process for you?
I've been talking to my wife about this a lot. Sort of this process. At first, it was a relief, because okay, it's done, and there's always a kind of relief from finishing. Then you realize actually now you've kind of given birth to this thing, and you've got to try and get it in front of as many people, and so it doesn't stop, but it goes into a different phase. At first, it was quite odd. I felt. I don't know if you've ever had one of those dreams. I think it's a fairly classic sort of anxiety dream where you might be standing in the queue of the post office and you look down and you realize you're naked. Right. So there's a lot of people have these kind of weird dreams. It felt a bit like that. I felt like, God, I've really exposed myself here. I mean, I know I say the book's about fishing, but it's about everything. And, it's very personal. And at first I felt like quite exposed. And then people started writing to me and calling me and saying how much they were enjoying the book and how they were moved by it, and non-anglers, people who never picked up a fishing rod in their life and what they got from it. And then I just started feeling immensely proud, actually. But it was a slow burn, and yeah, I think it's the most creatively fulfilling thing I've ever done, and it's really, yeah, it's I'm really happy with it, and yeah, and this process now of just sharing it is also a tremendous source of joy. So it kind of went from relief, like, oh God, I'm glad that's done, to this incredible journey of this book now. Yeah.
What would you like the reader to get from it?
Um, I suppose different readers, different things, but overall, I would love people to find a deeper connection with nature. Whether that's through fishing or anything else, to kind of find themselves in nature, to find that aspect of themselves that is most at home in nature and the outdoors. I say nature, look, this could be a village pond, it doesn't necessarily have to be that you're somewhere, super remote or super exotic. I'd love that. I love the idea of, people making a little bit of space in their lives for that. That would be a wonderful outcome for the book. I also really want people to laugh. I think it's a funny book. You said you laughed, which, I do. As I say, I do tend to attract the absurdity, and it's, and that I've written a lot about that. So I'd love to make people laugh, and on a deeper level, for people to find a bit more of a deeper connection with the outdoors.
I think you do that perfectly. I really do. Now, you touched on the introduction. Have you got another bit to read for us?
I do.
Brilliant.
I do. So I'm going to read from a chapter called Blow-ins and Home Waters, and it touches a lot of on the, how I ended up in Ireland and why I ended up in Ireland. And I'm just going to read a bit from the chapter. So beyond the eyes of its meandering dairy herds and bedraggled mountain sheep, Ireland's West Waterford and South Tipperary remain mostly overlooked. The Celtic tiger lost its teeth in a nasty fall on the way down and spared the area the ghost estates and soulless and often pointless development seen elsewhere during those collective years of financial psychosis. You can still find old Ireland here, and if you stop in the right spots with the right attitude, you can sometimes feel it. There's proper quiet to be heard, proper dark to be seen, and proper forgotten to be found. And of course, there are rivers. When we were brave or reckless enough, it matters not which, to buy a house here, I drew a big red circle on a map that crossed the River Blackwater, the Shore, the Nire and the Tar, and dozens of ignored tributaries. A house in the circle would put us, me, within a 20-minute drive from truly wild brown trout. With the mountains for neighbours and on a clear day the ocean visible from high ground, it's the sort of lifestyle that if posted on Instagram would be signed off with #LivingTheDream or something equally obnoxious. This place perfectly fitted my definition of paradise and was totally beyond my deserve. But my wife Julia and our daughter Moya did deserve such things, and I hoped I could be their +1. I wondered how the locals would take to us this deep into the country. It's not exactly port protection Alaska, but the nearest pub would be best reached in walking boots. A snack for the journey wouldn't be a bad idea, and a head torch or a full moon for the way home essential. I imagine us being fairly odd neighbours and potentially outsiders who might struggle to become anything but that. But it turns out there's a giant magnet buried somewhere around here that attracts some wonderfully diverse and eccentric characters that seem to be mixing well with the wonderfully eccentric locals. Accents from all over are slowly taking on the song and dance of the Irish, and the blow-ins are here to be changed by the place rather than trying to change it. Blow-ins are how the Irish like to describe anyone who can't claim to have at least 4 generations that have lived in the locality. The rules are very strict, and someone born on the wrong side of a ditch could potentially be tarred with the blow-in brush. I don't think there's any malice in the term beyond a gentle poke, and I've only heard it used in a friendly manner. The house we found sits almost dead centre of my drawn red circle. It looks out over the Knockmealdown Mountains. Every day, the same view that is never the same, constantly redefined by infinite combinations of light and colour and season. There's something about mountains that quieten a place, as if in reverence to the elders or from fear of waking giants. The mountain gives me a perspective on something I don't understand, but need and appreciate wholeheartedly. If I turn right from the house, I'll reach the river Shore, the river Nire and the Tar, or if I turn left, the river Blackwater. I cannot go anywhere without passing a river, so if I'm going anywhere that doesn't involve fishing, I'm forced to question whether where I'm going is really the best use of my time. The River Shore, rising on the Devil's Bit Mountain, flows for 115 miles, lazy and quiet through pasture, until it's invited to dance around the ankles of the Gulty, Knockmealdown and Comeragh Mountains, until eventually forgetting itself in the Atlantic Ocean at Waterford. It holds the Irish salmon record of 57 pounds caught in 1874, but like so many rivers, its salmon population has declined dramatically. I do see a few salmon from time to time, some mysteriously taking black flies off the surface on summer evenings, which I thought for a moment were epic trout. But I don't fish the shore for salmon anymore. They're having a hard enough time without me bothering them, and besides, the trout fishing is exceptional. I once met a fisheries inspector on the shore who was surveying the water. He enthusiastically told me that the shore has the highest density of wild brown trout of any river in Europe. I don't know if that's true, but I've repeated the fact enough for it to feel true. Feel free to do the same. For some, trout fishing is seen as a waste of a day that could have been spent salmon fishing, but if I had to choose between the two, I would never cast for a salmon again. It's not that I don't enjoy it, but for me, sight fishing for trout in crystal clear rivers with dry fly is fishing's highest form. I sometimes take my canoe down sections of the shore, and I've seen fish in its unreachable and unfishable sections that I could not describe without being called a liar. I once hooked a trout from a canoe that pulled me 50 metres upstream into overhanging branches before breaking me off. Cue the Jaws soundtrack. There is a certain amount of animosity between anglers and canoeists. To be honest, I think it's more one way, anglers' animosity towards canoeists. But the sight of me in a canoe with a fly fishing rod disturbs both parties equally. I like to think that it promotes at least a tiny bit of reevaluation. I think everyone should have a right to enjoy the river, regardless of how you choose to enjoy them, as long as you're not doing any harm. It's important to remember that when people engage in the outdoors, the more people that engage in the outdoors, the more people create meaningful relationships with it, the more value it, and the more people value it, and the more will stand up to protect and defend it. Regardless of your chosen pastime, we're all in this river together. The shore I fish offers every type of water, from perfect fly water to fairly pointless. But this definition can change with the season and even the time of day. Every year, I learn enough to grasp a deeper understanding of how little I know and how little I will ever know. The shore seems to offer the perfect balance of success and failure, which means you look back content and forward with ambition. There's a stretch that I fish late summer evenings until there is no light beyond the quietest echoes of a sunset. I cast caddisfly to herd but barely seen large trout that only rise under a dark sky. The river is different by night, like a drunk losing their inhibitions. Its lips loosen, and it tells you things it would never mention by day. The big fish that sits in the deepest holes around the bridge where the myriad of opposing and confusing currents give shelter, or hidden in undercut banks, venture out for uncharacteristically relaxed evening stroll, or whatever the finned equivalent would be. The takes are unexpected, savage, and entirely addictive. A barn owl once ghosted its way down the river towards me and stopped on a branch to watch. It felt like I was in the presence of a profound wisdom that couldn't be fathomed, like meeting a mute philosopher. It finally went in impossible silence, and the second hand of my watch returned to normal speed. I remember that owl clearer than any fish.
Perfect. Really good, Richard. And folks, I asked Richard along I always say these things because I want to be completely transparent that he's didn't ask to be on. He's not paid to be on. I wanted him on because I think the book's really, really good. And you've got a really good sense of it there. So, Richard, thank you so much for that. That was a really beautiful piece of writing that I know people are going to enjoy reading more of it as well. So thank you very much for that. Are you enjoying this whole process?
Yes. Yeah.
Of
Absolutely.
releasing a book to the world.
Yeah, absolutely. It's it's a wonderful thing. It's definitely a new experience, but it's a wonderful one, and people have just been incredibly supportive of it, like yourself. So thank you, Pete.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. Let's move on a little bit more because we're pushing on an hour now anyway, and I just wanted to understand a little bit more about your hopes, dreams, and everything else. And you said that you've been to Slovenia. You mentioned about guides in other places. But of all the places you've been, do you have a dream destination that you may have visited, or is there a place that you would love to visit that you've never been to?
For me, New Zealand, as it is for many fly anglers, is the ultimate fly fishing destination. It's pretty much the ultimate destination in many places. I mean, I was working in a job at the time, and they were very generous in that they gave sabbaticals if you were employed for long enough. And I went with my wife and my daughter. She was maybe 4 at the time, or 5. We went to New Zealand for 2 months in a camper van, traveling around the North and the South Island. And it was just the most amazing experience of my life. I mean, in every aspect, including the fishing. And when we came back, I was hell bent on moving to New Zealand. That was the plan. Right, this is it. We're selling up. We're going to New Zealand. If it's just going to give in to being a trout bum. Look, I would love to go back there. But equally, there are so many places to fish, and I have fished some of my, I fished in Cuba, and I've fished in India, and I've Venezuela, and all sorts of places, and there are so many places to discover. Anywhere where the trout will rise to my fly, I'd be very happy to try. Actually, at the end of this month, I'm going to go to Croatia, which is somewhere I haven't fished before, which I hear wonderful things about. And then I'm going to be in your part of the world, actually, in Exmoor. Would you be far from Exmoor?
Not a million miles at all.
Yeah. So there was the Wild Trout Trust's auction, and I won a week at Primrose Cottage, which is on the East Lynn River. So that's you don't need to travel far for fantastic fishing either. So looking forward to that.
Nice. Yeah. Well, we'll talk afterwards, but I'm sure we can try and meet up somewhere and perhaps cast a line if we're able to do that. I think I know the answer to this, but you've got one day of fishing. One day, that's it. Where would it be?
What a terrible thought. Oh, I'd fish the beat of the shore that I fish more than anything else, more often than any other. I just love it. I know it, and my feet know the rocks. I suppose that. Yeah, I wouldn't blow the opportunity on anywhere I didn't know. I would just use that day to go to a place I truly love.
Correct answer. Perfect one. That's what I had my fingers crossed here that you were going to say it, because as I often say on here, there's no place like home. And
no.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right. Well, we're going to start to wind things down a little bit, but we've got the question for our playlist, the Fly Culture playlist. Is there a song that sets the tone on that short drive to the river that you like to listen and you hit repeat on when you're on your drive?
I don't have a piece of music I play when I go fishing. Generally, I'm kind of too I turn off music. I open the windows if I can of the car. I'm just sort of tuning in. But in terms of music, that I think goes well with fly fishing, and it seems particularly apt at the moment. Would be Ladysmith Black Mambazo. They did a track called "Rain, Rain, Beautiful Rain," because without it, there is no fishing. Actually, I added that's not the name of the track. Their track is just "Rain, Rain, Beautiful Rain." I added the last bit, but
yeah. Excellent choice. Yeah. Excellent. Well, we'll go look that one up, folks, as well. Where can people connect with you, and where can they buy a copy of the book?
Right. So the book has been beautifully made by Medlar Press. The Medlar Press in the UK, and their address is medlarpress.com. So you can buy it directly from them. If you're a UK listener, that's definitely the closest. If you're in Ireland, you can buy it also directly from me. And also where you can get hold of me is at www.gorodecky.com. I will spell that. Sorry, GORODECKY.com. And so if you're in Ireland, you can buy it from there, and then the postage is local. And also you can get in touch with me there. Always happy to chat with people about fishing and the like.
And what about, we have quite a lot of listeners from around the fishing world as well. So is there anywhere, would they get that from you, or would they get it from Medlar, or? Either.
I would say first up, go through the publisher, because that's what they do. But any problems, or perhaps if you wanted a signed book or something like that, then you can just come to me directly, and I'd be happy to do that.
And you've got a sense of this for the people listening as well. Buy it, you're not going to regret it. I promise you that. I'm a good halfway through it, and I've really enjoyed reading it. And I'm sort of at the stage, I know when I like a book because I portion bits of it, so that I break it down and then say, right, I'm going to give myself 10 minutes here, I'm going to give myself 20 minutes here, and I'm doing that. So that's how I feel about it. And as ever, it's a straight up view. There's no financial thing in this whatsoever. It's just a great book, and I want to shout about creative people doing really, really good things. Richard, it's been lovely to catch up. I suspect we're going to be casting a fly together before too long, but I would like
that, Pete.
I would like to say a massive thank you for being a guest on the podcast today. Thank you.
Pete, thanks so much. And look, equally, thanks for putting out Fly Culture. You're always very busy thanking other people, but thank you. It's an absolutely spectacular mag and a wonderful podcast. So thank you for everything you do for writing and for the sport.
Thank you. That's very kind. Well, everyone, this has been another episode of the Fly Culture Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. There'll never be any charge for these. So I hope you keep enjoying them, and there'll be plenty more coming very, very soon. Thank you so much for listening.
The Fly Culture Podcast is brought to you in association with Fly Culture, a quarterly published magazine owned and run by fly anglers. When it comes to fly fishing, we've got you covered.